Okay, so I was kind of looking for other subjects I could yap about, and I came across a document that I had made, I think, a few years ago that was comparing Subnautica and Subnautica Below Zero. And it's been a few years since I made the document, it's been a few years since I've really played the games, but I thought it would be kind of fun to just like yap about Subnautica and see how much of it I remember. Just based on the like, because the document I made was just little bullet points with like no explanation. So we'll just see how much I remember. Um, and by the way, welcome to episode 4 of Drew Yaps. So first, I'll just explain a little bit about Subnautica and Below Zero. So, Subnautica is a video game. I honestly have no idea when it came out, so I'm going to look it up right now. It came out in 2014 for Windows, and then it was also on Xbox and PlayStation and stuff over the years. So, Subnautica is a very popular game, and it is absolutely incredible. It's a game where you're on the way it starts is like you're on this big spaceship or something, and it gets like shot down, and so you're the only person that survives, and you like land in this escape pod in the ocean. So you're just in the ocean, and it's an alien planet, so there's all these different alien like aquatic creatures, and you start in this beginning area called like the safe shallows, and you have to collect resources and build a base and build vehicles and stuff so that you can explore deeper through the game and like deeper into the ocean, with the end goal of like finding your way to safety, I guess. I'm honestly struggling to remember exactly how the Oh no, I think I remember how the game ends. Yeah, so you're trying to like find a way to get off the island. Which, by the way, this is an amazing game. So if at any point this sounds interesting and you're like actually planning to play it, don't let me spoil the story for you. Go ahead and check out the game. But I'm gonna continue yapping now. So as you go through the game, you start to learn more about the story behind like things that have happened on this planet, and eventually you find. Oh, I'm trying to remember exactly how it goes. That's like the whole point of this is I'm doing it without reminding myself of what it was. But there's like this big it's like the Sea Emperor Leviathan or something. It's this big underwater creature, and it's got these eggs that can't be hatched. And there's also this sickness, this like disease that's spreading throughout the island, or not the island, the planet, and that is, as you find out, that is the reason that your ship got shot down, essentially, is because there's this disease, and it's like super deadly and dangerous. And there were these other aliens, it's more humanoid. They're not exactly humans, because we learn about more about them later in the second game. But they're more similar to humans. They're not like aquatic. They're not like fish like in this game. And they come to the island, and they end up building this big like laser gun to shoot down any ship that comes too close to the planet, to make sure that nobody can like come to the planet and accidentally carry the disease somewhere else. And so we our goal is to escape. And so at one point, like, there's a rescue ship that comes and says they're going to rescue us, but then it gets shot down by the laser gun. So we have to find a way to disable the gun before we can do anything. And so, but when you go into the building where the gun is, when you try to disable it, it doesn't work because it like it like takes a blood sample or something, and it finds that you've already got the disease in you, and so the only way to disable the gun is if somebody who doesn't have the disease presses it. So basically, from that point on, the main goal before we can escape is to somehow cure this disease. And once we get all like deep into the center of the planet, and we find the Sea Empress Leviathan or whatever it's called, we help her to hatch her eggs, and through doing that we get the like that helps us in some way. It like helps us spread the cure for the disease. And so now that we're cured, we can disable the gun, and then we literally build an entire rocket ship, which is very impressive. Although I think the like crafting thing that we have, I think that is like actually part of the lore. So it's not like we just built a spaceship by hand, but you build an actual rocket ship and like escape the planet. So it's an incredible game. It is so fun. It's very replayable, I would say. Like it's not really randomized like some games are. Like something like Minecraft, what a big part of what makes it so replayable is every time you play, it's like a completely randomized world generation. Subnautica is not like that. The world is always the same. The only thing that's really randomized that I remember is like where you start. So the area where your like escape pod lands, it can be anywhere in the safe shallows, but that's about it. But it's still an incredibly replayable game in my opinion, because the gameplay is just so fun. And as someone who has thalassophobia, which is a fear of like the being deep in the ocean, or that might just be a fear of the ocean in general. For me specifically, it's like being deep in the ocean. But it's a pretty scary game. But it also kind of has helped me get over my thalassophobia some. Not entirely, but it did help. But it's honestly scared me more than a lot of like actual horror games and stuff. Not that I've played a whole lot of horror games, but I've played a few. So it's an amazing game, and I'll get into some of the more specific reasons why in a second, because the whole document is about like comparing the two games. But it's great. I would totally recommend playing it. And then eventually later they came out with Subnautica Below Zero, which is like a sequel of sorts. It takes place on a different island, and this time you're playing as a different character who is coming to this island in search of her sister, who like went missing or something while she was working on that I keep saying island, I mean planet, while she was working on that planet. And you this like alien guy who's one of the race of aliens that created the gun in the previous game, like implants itself in your brain or something. I don't remember exactly what it is, but like he can just like talk to you whenever, or maybe he's like psychically communicating. I don't really remember exactly how it works, but you sort of uncover the reason that the sister disappeared, and then you eventually you like build a new body for the alien that's like been talking to you, because he doesn't have a body and that's why it's just his voice. You like build him a new body, and he like takes you in his spaceship to the area where he lives, which could potentially be a setup for a third game. I don't think there's ever going to be a third game. I don't know. But the thing with Below Zero is there's some good aspects about it. Some of the things that are great about Subnautica still like shine through in Below Zero, but I think it's a much worse game, and that is the general opinion. And there's a lot of reasons why I think it's worse, and that's kind of what I want to talk about. And I've also watched some like videos before of people talking about the problems with Below Zero, and I think something that is kind of harsh, but honestly a pretty good way of putting it, is I saw somebody, one of the videos I watched, somebody said like Subnautica Below Zero like has the problems it has are such a big deal, and so like so much just worse compared to the original game that it almost makes you wonder if they just got lucky with when they were making Subnautica, which is very harsh, but honestly I think is kind of fair. So I think now I'm ready to get into this. So there's a thing at the top of the document that says for both talk about vehicles. So I guess I'll do that first. I'm going to be starting with all the stuff for Subnautica. I have it split up into like the good, the bad, the ugly. There's nothing for the ugly for Subnautica because it's a great game, but there is some for the bad, but whatever. It's not a huge deal. So first of all, vehicles in Subnautica. The first vehicle you get, you have to like craft them. I might just Google what vehicles there are because I can't really remember what they're called. But the first vehicle you get is the Seamoth, which is basically just like a submarine. It's a cool vehicle. It's very helpful for exploring areas. But there are some later things that you need in the game that you cannot achieve with the Seamoth, and so you need something better. So, oh my goodness. Okay, so the Seamoth is cool, and that's one thing I like is the vehicle progression is pretty nice. And also the Seamoth and the later vehicles kind of serve different purposes. So the Seamoth still kind of has a use later in the game, even when you've got the other vehicles. And another thing that's really cool is you can get all these different upgrades for each vehicle that just some of them are like necessary to complete the game, and some of them just help and make things easier. But it's really cool. The next vehicle is incredible. I love it so much. Best vehicle in the game. It's called the Prawn Suit. It's basically like this big mech suit, and then there's a bunch of different upgrades you can get for it. I'm going to come back to the Prawn Suit because I love it and it is relevant to both games. But before I talk about that, the last vehicle in Subnautica, not counting the escape rocket because that's not really a big deal, is the Cyclops, which is just like this massive, it's like a huge submarine. It can basically be its own base because you like build an underwater base, but once you have the Cyclops, I think you can like place your storage and your crafting things and all that like inside of the Cyclops. So it's like basically a portable base. The problem is it's massive, so it can be kind of slow and hard to navigate, which these problems are good. It's like it balances it out because the Cyclops can be so helpful, but it's massive, so it can be hard to navigate and hard to like get in. You can't get into smaller places, so you might still need to use the Seamoth or the Prawn Suit for that. Also, it like depending on how many of the features of the Seamoth of the Cyclops you're using, it makes noise, and if the louder it is, the more likely it is to attract like dangerous sea creatures. So you've got to be careful with that. My problem with the Cyclops, or really this is more of a problem with the escape rocket, but the Cyclops, at least in my opinion, for the way that I play the game, the Cyclops is pretty much useless. The Prawn Suit is incredible, and it's so helpful in so many ways, and I can get through the whole game with my Prawn Suit once I make it. When I play through the game, I never make a Cyclops. It's just not necessary. The problem is the escape rocket, while it's not a vehicle you actually use in the game, it only serves the purpose of completing the game. The escape rocket is a necessary part of the game, and one of the items you need to craft it can only be crafted from the crafting module inside the Cyclops. So even though I never have to use the Cyclops, I can get through the whole game with the Prawn Suit, I still have to make the Cyclops in order to get one single item for the escape rocket, which is like fair enough. I get why you would want to, make a progression system that incentivizes you to make each vehicle, but as someone who doesn't use the Cyclops, it is kind of annoying, especially considering how expensive it is, how many resources you need. It is kind of annoying to have to make the Cyclops just for the purpose of getting one item for the escape rocket. But back to the prawn suit. The prawn suit is sick. So there's a couple reasons you need it for progression. The first reason is that a big part of the game is getting all these different materials and resources for crafting so that you can make the items that help you get farther into the game, so that you can eventually get to the point where, you know, you're crafting your rocket ship and whatever to escape. Like, getting all those materials is the main part of progressing through the game. And so you need to be able to get those materials. And the prawn suit is one of the ways to do that, because there are some resources that the only way you can get them is through these massive, like, rocks. Because most of the resources, most of the materials, you can just swim up to them and click them, and then you've got it. So, like, it'll be, if you've got to get gold, you'll just find one little piece of gold and pick it up. But you can also, deeper down, find, like, these massive veins of gold. And the only way to dig those up and get the ores is through the prawn suit. One of the upgrades you can get is you can get a drill arm. I think it's an upgrade. I don't think it's originally comes with it. I'm not entirely sure. But you can get a drill arm for the prawn suit that drills through those rocks and gets those materials. And I'm pretty sure some of the materials that you need to progress through the game, you can only get with the drill arm, which I think is a better way of, like, using the vehicle as progression compared to, like, the Cyclops being necessary for the escape rocket. I think it being needed for resources is a better incentive than it being needed just to make another vehicle. But the drill arm is helpful, and so it's needed for progression for that. But the other reason that it's needed for progression is because of a different upgrade, that's the depth modules. And those, as the name might suggest, allow you to go deeper in the water. So a big problem with the Seamoth is it's a very helpful small little submarine, but it can't go that deep. And some of the areas that you need to go into to progress through the game do get very deep, and you have to get, like, all the way to the deepest point to find the Sea Empress Leviathan and, like, you know, finish up the game. And so while the Seamoth does have depth modules you can get, it still can't go super deep. And so eventually you need to get the prawn suit and then get the prawn suit's depth modules. And once you have the highest depth module for the prawn suit, that allows you to go all the way to the deepest point in the game. So it's very necessary for progression, but it's also just a really helpful vehicle. It makes you a lot stronger, because like, if something attacks you, then it damages the suit instead of damaging yourself. But the suit still has a fair amount of health, and there's an item that you can get that you can use to repair suits. So if your suit gets too low, you can, like, hide somewhere and jump out and repair it. And so it's helpful, it makes you stronger, but you're still not, like, invulnerable. So there's still some danger, you still have to be careful, but it makes you a lot more powerful, which honestly does make the game more fun, because it's, like, it's fairly late into the game that you get the stuff that makes you more powerful. And I think, like, powerful stuff in video games, when it comes toward the end of the game, that's great. Like Terraria, once you've beat the final boss, you can make this crazy powerful sword called the Zenith. I'm not totally sure how it's pronounced, but, like, that sword is insanely powerful, but you can't make it until after you've defeated the final boss multiple times. So, like, I think that's fair. And this isn't, like, quite as powerful, but I just think, like, the point in the game that you can get something also plays a big part into how balanced it is. Like, if you had the prawn suit from the start, that would be really unbalanced, really overpowered, but because you get it later, it's all right. But specifically, the way I like to do it is I get one drill arm. The prawn suit has 2 arms, and you can upgrade both of them. So I get one drill arm, which is useful for multiple reasons. It can dig up resources, but also you can use the drill arm to attack, like, the alien fish, which is pretty helpful. And then for the other arm, I get like my absolute favorite part of the game, which is the grappling arm. So what it does is it's like a grappling hook that just grabs onto whatever you shoot it at. But it's not one of those grappling hooks where it like pulls you in. You still have to like, but you can use it to swing around, which is helpful. And if you get good enough at navigating with it, you can like flick your camera in a way where it actually does launch you higher. So it's super helpful for navigation, but it also takes some practice to really get used to how to use it. And you can even like shoot the grappling hook at the ground in front of you, and then like flick your camera to launch yourself forward and just use it to walk faster, which is nice because the prawn suit moves kind of slow. So it's really fun to use, but it also is a bit of a challenge and takes time to learn how to use, which makes you feel even more accomplished and like you've earned it once you've learned how to use it. And it's very helpful in the final areas. So the prawn suit is just like an awesome vehicle. It's really fun to use, and I love it. So that is, let's see, was there anything else I had to say about it? Oh, it also has storage for items, which is nice, because it allows you to carry more stuff around. And yeah, it moves slower, and it's a bit more difficult to move around in than the Seamoth, which helps prevent it from being too overpowered. Because the Seamoth, it's like an actual submarine, so it can just move like up and down in the water. But the prawn suit is like a mech suit, so you can't actually like swim in it. It just kind of walks around on the bottom of the water, so it is more like difficult to navigate in, which helps balance things out. Let's see. Another thing that I really like about Subnautica is the Leviathans. The Leviathans are like the most important, I guess, alien fish. I can't think of a better word for it. They're like, they are alien fish. They're the most like important and the coolest ones in the game. You find them at various points, but generally it's like in the deeper areas, the more late game parts that you encounter them. I would say the one exception to that is the Reaper Leviathan, which is probably the least dangerous one, but funnily enough, it's also the one that scares me the most. The Reaper Leviathan is found in two areas that I know of, or that I remember at least. There is the ship, that the big spaceship that you're in that crashes in the beginning of the game. You can actually go and visit it and like go inside, and there's some resources and some story stuff that you can find. And around that there's a Reaper Leviathan, which makes it very scary to try to get inside. And then there's this area called the Dunes, which I'll talk about a little more later, but that area also has some Reaper Leviathans. And I don't know what it is, but just something about the way they look and the sound they make, like it scares me. But all things considered, they're not that dangerous. They're pretty easy to avoid. Let's see. Then there's the Ghost Leviathan, and that's kind of found in two different areas. There's this area, I don't remember what it's called, but it's like this green, like toxic area or something, and it's got these like ghost trees and stuff, and it is a necessary part of the game. And there's Ghost Leviathans there, and they're pretty cool, a bit eerie, a bit creepy. They're like blue and see-through. Like all the Leviathan designs are great. And I'm gonna look up the Leviathans real quick just to make sure that I'm getting this right. Oh, I guess there's a few more Leviathans that I'm missing that are considered Leviathans. So I'll talk about that in a second. But the Ghost Leviathan, I believe the Ghost Leviathan juvenile is what you find in that smaller area. Oh, it's called the Lost River. Yeah, so they look really cool. They're not that dangerous if you kind of just, as long as you're pretty stealthy, they're pretty easy to avoid. But they look really cool, and they're kind of spooky. But what's really cool is the Ghost Leviathan adults, which Subnautica has a limited area. It's not like an endless world generation. And so because of this, they need a way to prevent players from going past the area that they're supposed to go in. And one way a game might do this is invisible walls. Some games will just put a big barrier around the map, and if you get to it, you can't go any farther. But the problem with that is it can kind of take you out of the environment, and Subnautica is all about like building that environment and making you really feel like you're in this world. And so it with this creative and really effective solution that they came up with is they have the adult ghost leviathans outside of the edge. I think it's called the crater edge, is once you get past all of the like area that you're supposed to go. And once you get to the crater edge, it's like just watery void, and then these massive ghost leviathans come after you, and they're like really strong and scary, and they just can kill you pretty easily, or at least are meant to scare you off. Unfortunately, I knew a fair amount about Subnautica before I played it for the first time, so I didn't like encounter these by myself. But if I had, I bet that would have scared me pretty bad. So that's pretty. The Ghost Leviathans are pretty cool. Also, there's this thing called the Sea Treader that's technically considered a Leviathan, but it's not that crazy. It just like walks around and leaves materials behind it, but I never go to the area where it's at. And then there's also the Reefback Leviathan, which is pretty cool looking one, but not like super interesting. But then the other interesting and main Leviathans there's the Sea Emperor Leviathan, like I talked about before, which is at the end of the game, and it's the only friendly Leviathan in the game, I think. At least it's the only one that's like completely unable to harm you. Actually, no, the Reefback Leviathan. Okay, anyways, it's the largest Leviathan in the game, but it's friendly. But I think the most interesting one is the Sea Dragon Leviathan. The Sea Dragon Leviathan it looks like it's the largest. It says it's the largest aggressive creature in Subnautica. And they are in basically the final area of the game, which is the lava zone. It's like that's where you have to go to get like the final materials you need, and then to get to the area where you find the Sea Emperor's Leviathan. So the Sea Dragon Leviathan is aggressive, and it like shoots fireballs at you, and it's pretty dangerous. If it looks like if it gets up close to you and it like bites you, if you're not in like the prawn suit, you die instantly. And if you're in the prawn suit, it does a decent amount of damage. But like it just has a ton of attacks, and it's really annoying, which I actually really like. That's one of the things I wrote as like one of the good qualities of Subnautica is Sea Dragon Leviathans are like really annoying. Because they just, when you're in the lava zone, they basically just chase you around the whole time, which can make it more difficult to navigate and to like find where you need to go. But I think that actually works really well because you're in like the final area of the game, so it should be a challenge. And they're annoying in a way that adds a challenge, not a way that just makes you like sick of the game. And that's a big reason why it's so important to get good with the grappling hook or the grappling arm on the prawn suit, and why it feels so satisfying is because once you get really good, you can just like run around the whole lava zone, just like pulling yourself along with the grappling hook and completely avoid all of the Sea Dragon Leviathan's attacks. And it feels so great to do that. It's a lot of fun. And another creature that is kind of annoying, but in a good way, is there's these ones called warpers. And when they get near you, what they can do is they can warp you, they can teleport you outside of your vehicle, which can be kind of annoying in a few different ways. If you're in an area that's like toxic, then you could start taking damage when you get warped out. Or like if there's a Sea Dragon Leviathan chasing you, you really don't want to get teleported out of your vehicle because that's going to be really dangerous. But it ends up being a cool feature because then it incentivizes you to, it adds more of a challenge to the areas they're in, and it incentivizes you to learn how to avoid them and just get better at movement. And so I think those are both creatures that are like kind of annoying, but in a way that adds a challenge and is really cool. Another thing that I love about the game is the way the story is presented. Basically, it starts off with you're like crashing in the ship, but once you land, you know nothing. There's no narration or anything. There's no speaking. The only times you hear people's voices is one of the ways you like uncover the story is you can find these like voice logs from people who were on the ship or on the planet in the past. But other than that, like there's no speaking. You feel completely isolated because of that, and you know absolutely nothing about what's going on, and you're not told how to progress through the game. You literally just explore the area, and as you do, you find all these new things and start figuring out what you can use them for. And so it completely leaves it up to you, but in a way that for the most part you can figure out like completely by yourself without needing to like Google stuff. There were a couple things that I did kind of have to Google, but it's not as bad as some games. One example is my favorite game of all time is Terraria. It's a great game, but one issue some people have with it is it's one of those games where you are kind of constantly having to, especially when you don't know how to progress through the game, you're like constantly having to Google what to do next and how to progress and all these things. Like it can be challenging to figure those things out on your own. Well, now when I say you have to Google them, you don't have to. There's definitely ways to figure out by like exploring, but it can take a while. And even as someone who has been playing Terraria for a lot of my life, and it's like my favorite game, I still have to Google plenty of things, like how to craft various items and whatnot. So this game I think is a lot better with that, where you know nothing, but it's still fairly easy to progress through the game and like figure out what to do without needing to Google stuff. So I just think the story is presented in such a cool way. I also think it's like a pretty cool story, but even cooler than the story itself is like the way you discover it, and just that feeling of isolation that comes from the complete lack of like any social interactions with any other characters, and even your own character that you're playing as like there's no like narration. And so I think it's perfectly done, and it fits the overall environment of the game and like the goal of the game perfectly. One thing I also like is with talking about is it Emperor Leviathan? Oh, it's not Empress, it's Emperor, but I think it's still a female. Anyway, with the Sea Emperor Leviathan, with the story that we uncover throughout the game, basically everything points to the idea that all of the Sea Emperor Leviathans are dead, like that they're extinct. And so when we reach the end of the game and we find that one of the Sea Emperor Leviathans is actually alive, that's like really cool, and it's like a big shock. And also just with how big the Sea Emperor Leviathan is, I just think it would be so scary to encounter in the game if it wasn't passive. The progression in the game just generally is really well done. I really like how all the materials you need are spread out in a way that the materials in your current area allow you to make the things that let you reach the next area, which has the next things you need, and just each area, for the most part, each area feels necessary to then progress to the next part of the game. And I just think that's very well done, and makes the gameplay flow very well. As I mentioned before, there's just like a complete sense of isolation. I thought it was pretty cool exploring the big ship that crashed in the beginning of the game. It's not like super important. There's a few things that you find that are helpful. I can't remember if they're completely necessary. But a big way that something I forgot to mention is one of the main ways that you unlock like the recipes to craft the various items that you need is you find like fragments of them throughout the game. And then you have this item that you can use to scan those fragments, and once you scan enough of them, you unlock the recipe. And so I think the prawn suit needs 3 fragments, and I'm pretty sure you can get like 2 of them inside of the big ship that crashes in the beginning, which is called the Aurora. So that alone is really helpful. The Cyclops, which is the big massive submarine thing that I never use. Even though I don't use it, I do like that it has the ability to hold either a sea moth or a prawn suit inside of it. That's pretty nice. One thing that's also cool is Leviathans are really difficult to kill, and there's not much point in doing it unless you're just doing it for fun, because it's not really necessary. But if you do kill a Leviathan, they don't come back the rest of the game. Like, they're permanently out of the game. A big way that you can learn about the story and find various resources and fragments is by finding wrecks throughout the game. So it'll just be like parts of spaceships that you can find, and you just, some of them require tools to get into, and some of them are just open, and you can swim throughout them and find various stuff, and they're really fun to explore. They also provide a fun, interesting challenge because you have a limited amount of breath in the game because you're swimming underwater. And so you can upgrade your tank throughout, but you every once in a while you have to go into your base or return to, or like swim up to the surface so you can get your breath back. And wrecks are a really interesting challenge because they can kind of be a bit maze-like as you're swimming through them, exploring. So you have to be careful to make sure that you save enough breath to where you're able to get through the wreck and find things, but also find your way back and make it to the surface without drowning, which can be difficult and I think is really fun to do. It's also really helpful. There are these things you can make called beacons, and you can like place them down and then give them a label, so that way no matter where you are, you can like see the beacon and know where something is. And that's especially helpful because without having to craft it, vehicles have beacons by default, which is great because there have definitely been times where I would have totally like just lost my vehicle forever if it wasn't for the beacon. And it means that like sometimes once I have a prawn suit, or even before then, like I'll leave my sea moth somewhere as a beacon so that I can remember where an important location is, and then I can just go back there later. The fragment system that's used to, get the recipes for everything is great because it gives you it adds more reason to explore. You're not just exploring to get the materials for the various things you want to craft, but also to get the recipes themselves. I can't remember exactly how much Subnautica is, but I think it's a good length game for the price you spend. And whenever there's like a sale on Steam, it's always like a good price. It has a nice sale. It does a really great job of using sound to create fear. I think there's some like ambient sounds in the areas, and then also like just the sounds that the creatures themselves make. Like it can be pretty scary, especially since there's no like dialogue or anything to distract us. I also think it's cool that I'm trying to figure out exactly what I meant by this. Oh, just like a lot of the stuff you find and the things that happen in the story, like you're not just straight up told what's going on. You just like see things or you read things or whatever, and you kind of are left to interpret things yourself. And I think that's really cool. And then time capsules, I'm not entirely sure how they work, but when you I think it's specifically when you escape on the rocket ship at the end of the game, you can place some items and a message into a time capsule, and then it's possible that when you're playing the game, you can find somebody else's time capsule. So it's like there's no multiplayer or anything, but you can actually find someone else's time capsule and then like read their message and get a few bonus items, which is pretty nice. Now, getting into the bad parts of Subnautica, which bad is maybe a strong word for some of these, but so I talked about before how the main area that has Reaper Leviathans is the dunes. But the thing is, the dunes aren't necessary. um, which I don't know how to feel about that. Like maybe there's something there that I don't know about, but I've never had to go to the dunes. I've always kind of avoided it because of the Reaper Leviathans, but like I've never had to go there. So I'm sure there's like resources and stuff, but it's not necessary for progression. But I don't necessarily think that's bad because exploration is like a big part of Subnautica and it's part of what makes it so cool. And so I would almost, I think I'd rather have more areas than necessary than the map be like too small or even just every area be necessary, because I don't think it would be bad for every area to be completely necessary for progression, but I do think it makes the world and the exploration more interesting if some of the areas are kind of just bonuses. So I put it in the bad because I feel like overall it doesn't contribute a whole lot to the game, but I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. There are some weird glitches that I've struggled with. The biggest one that I've found annoying is sometimes the prawn suit gets stuck in the ground. And it looks like I looked into this and it seems like the most common cause is like when you close out of the game, sometimes the collision of the ground will like disappear before the prawn suit does, and so it starts falling into the ground before like the game completely quits, which can be annoying. So that's pretty annoying, getting the prawn suit stuck. I think there is like a solution to fix it, but it's just kind of annoying to deal with. So there's some weird glitches, but overall it's not that bad. And like I said before, I also found it kind of annoying that I had to make the Cyclops to progress through the game, but I don't think it's that bad. There is an area that does have some contribution to the story, but isn't super important, called the Lost River Laboratory Cache. And the first like few times I played the game, I literally had no idea that it existed, because it's not required to progress, but it does contribute to the story. And so I kind of feel like something that contributes to the story should be necessary, or at least like hinted at in some way. But I can also understand how it could maybe be an incentive to explore more. So again, it's kind of mixed. Nothing I have in the bad for Subnautica is necessarily bad. It just stood out as potentially not being as good, I guess. And then the last thing is, early in the game there are these creatures called crash fish, which when you're swimming around getting resources, they just like swim up to you and explode, and they're pretty annoying. But I don't think that's necessarily bad. And I do think a positive for it is, especially because they're mostly present in the beginning of the game, it could actually be a good way to kind of, because you start in the safe shallows, which is called the safe shallows for a reason, because it's safe. And so it could be a good way to teach you that like this world is dangerous, and you need to be like careful of what you allow near you and what's in your environment. So it's not entirely bad. But that's everything for Subnautica. Like I said, that it's a great game, and I think that's clear in how there were a lot of things in the good, and even the stuff in the bad I think could potentially still contribute positively to the game. The problem comes when you get to Subnautica Below Zero. Now, one thing I've thought about is, and that I honestly don't know that I for sure have an answer to, is Subnautica Below Zero a bad game, or is it a bad game relative to Subnautica? Because Subnautica is such an incredible game that maybe Below Zero just feels disappointing in comparison, but on its own isn't that bad of a game. But as someone who loves Subnautica, I don't think I'm in the proper position to decide that. So that's something that I think you should keep in mind, is while I think, when I talk about Below Zero, while I think it is a significantly worse game than the original Subnautica, it is entirely possible that it's still like a pretty decent game on its own. And also keep in mind, I didn't finish Subnautica Below Zero because I was like so annoyed and bored with it. It just, like, I liked it so much less than Subnautica that I didn't finish it. I just quit like halfway through through the game and then watched a video of someone finishing it and then watched the videos of people talking about why it's a worse game. So anyway, let's get into it. So starting with the good parts of the game, the environment is great. In Subnautica and Below Zero, the environment's really cool. It feels like an alien planet while still having a bit of familiarity that kind of connects it to our world and what we're used to. And I think what also helps contribute to that is we know so little about like what's deep in the ocean. Like, I think it's something like 80-90% of the ocean still hasn't been explored or something like that. Like, there's so much we haven't explored in the ocean that the ocean can feel, even on Earth, it can feel alien. And so they do a great job of utilizing that and creating all these different, like, cool looking environments. So overall, the environment in Below Zero is still great. It looks really good, and there's a lot of fun stuff. I also believe, at least it appears, that the prawn suit is still in the game. So that's cool. I guess I was supposed to talk about the vehicles for this one too, so I'm gonna pull that up. I know less about it, but I know that there's some problems. Let's see. Well, that's Subnautica. There's Below Zero. So yeah, the prawn suit is still in the game. I don't remember how useful it is compared to Subnautica, because again, I only played like half the game. But the Subnautica's is the prawn suit is really cool and I love it, and so I put it in the good. The other vehicles, so the Sea Moth and the Cyclops both were replaced with one vehicle called the Sea Truck. The Sea Truck starts out as a tiny submarine similar to the Sea Moth, but what happens is the upgrade modules, instead of like just allowing it to go deeper or whatever, although there are depth modules too, the modules actually add entire sections onto the Sea Truck. So like you can get a module that adds a dock for your prawn suit. You can add a storage module, a teleportation module, whatever that is. So it can kind of be, again, like the Cyclops, it can become a portable base. But from what I've seen people talk about it, because I didn't really use the Sea Truck, other than the like original module pretty much, I've seen a lot of people say it's worse than the Cyclops. It's kind of annoying to deal with. Like it's just not as good. I get that they were going for something different and interesting, and I respect and appreciate that, but it's not as good of a replacement. And then the other vehicle is called the Snow Fox, which allows you to like quickly travel along land. It's pretty nice. It's nothing like crazy, but it is helpful. I think because the land, you're on like this like super cold snowy planet, and so when you go on land, which I assume I'll address that. Yeah, okay. When you go on land, it's super cold, so there's various things you can do to keep you warm, and one of those is riding the Snow Fox, so that is really helpful. Another thing I said I liked is I liked exploring the land bases, which is one thing that's pretty cool about the game. In Subnautica, you're pretty much entirely underwater. There are a couple islands that have some like important story things and some helpful items, but aside from that, you spend like your entire time underwater. Below Zero has a bit more of a focus on going on land. Still not a whole lot, which is good because it should be mostly focused on being underwater because that's the whole point of the game. But I did like going and exploring the land bases. Like it was pretty cool. Also, batteries are used in both games to power like everything, and in Below Zero they did make batteries a little harder to craft, which I thought was actually a nice change because batteries are really useful, so it makes sense that it would be a bit challenging. And I'm pretty sure in both games there is a thing that you can craft eventually and put in your base called a battery charger, where at any point in time, but especially once your battery runs out of charge, you can just put it in there and it'll charge it back up, and it gets rid of the need to craft a new battery. So, especially considering how once you get the battery charger, there's much less of a point in crafting batteries, I think it is really cool and makes a lot of sense for batteries to be a little harder to make. There is a frozen Leviathan in the game. It's like literally frozen in ice. It's not like, I think it's alive because it's like preserved. I'm not totally sure. It might be dead. If there's a problem with that, I'll get to it. I can't remember. But the frozen Leviathan is massive, and like part of the story is that they were the crew that the main the character you play as, the crew that your sister was part of before she disappeared was like. I can't think of a good word, like investigating it, researching it, sort of. I know there's a better word that I can't think of, but the frozen Leviathan is pretty cool, and it's honestly kind of scary to be around, even though it is frozen. Also on land, there are these creatures called snow stalkers, which are these big, like, furry, I think, like, four-legged creatures that'll, like, run around and attack you. And they do a good job of making the land more dangerous without being too difficult to avoid. And then what I forgot to mention, because I didn't remember, is that the alien race that created, like, the gun in the first game and, like, all that advanced technology throughout the game, they're called architects. And so we encounter an architect, but without a body, in this game, called Alan. And one bit of the story that we find out in this game is that Alan, through, I can't remember exactly why, but through something he did, he actually was, like, I believe on accident, the reason that the disease was, like, released onto the planet in the first place. So there's a chance that this game might actually take place on the same planet, just in a different part of it. I don't quite remember. Now, something I put in the bad is the Leviathans. So the Leviathans in the first game are really cool and scary and dangerous and contribute a lot to the game. The Leviathans in this game are kind of a disappointment. So going through them, because I've got the wiki page pulled up. The first one is the glow whale. This one's passive. It's just like a big whale thing. It's pretty cool. It's one of those things that's, kind of scary to be around. I just think whales in general are, like, kind of freaky because they're so big. So it's like cool, but it doesn't contribute much. I have absolutely no idea how to say this, but it's like chelicerate or something. Oh wait, it says right there, chelicerate. I was close. This, I guess, kind of takes the place of the Reaper Leviathan. But it's lame, honestly. It doesn't look that cool. Like, it's kind of a fun design, but compared to the Leviathans in the first game, it really doesn't look that cool. And it's pretty small, so it's really not that scary. And I just, like, I don't care about this one at all. And then instead of the Ghost Leviathan in, like, the Void area that kills you if you go too far, there's a Void Chelicerate. And, like, I don't know. It's alright, but it's just, again, compared to the first game, it's pretty lame. Definitely, I would say the coolest Leviathan in the game is the Shadow Leviathan. The design is so cool. Like, it looks great. The problem with the Shadow Leviathan is not actually the Leviathan itself, but the area it's located in, which I might address this later in the document, but I can't entirely remember. But it's in this area called the Crystal Caves, and from what I remember, like, hearing about, the problem is the Shadow Leviathan is so large in relation to the Crystal Caves that there are some areas where, like, there's just not enough room to get away from the Shadow Leviathan. Like, you can be hiding from it, and it'll like hit you through a wall, basically. And that's kind of that sounds annoying. But like, aside from that, Shadow Leviathan does look cool, even though I don't think it's as cool as the ones in the other game. There's the ice worm, which is just like this thing that pokes out and like attacks you on land. They're all right. They can be pretty annoying. And then what is this? Vent garden. Oh, I think I know what this is. This one's passive, and it's like it kind of looks like a jellyfish almost, or a jelly. I don't know, whatever. It looks like a jelly, but like it's massive, and there's a whole like ecosystem inside, and you can swim inside it. That's kind of a cool idea, but like the actual dangerous leviathans in the water, there's two. There's the Cheliceraate and the Shadow Leviathan, and the other game had three, and that was cooler. And also, the Cheliceraate is lame. So the Leviathans are just kind of a letdown, honestly. The Frozen Leviathan looks pretty cool. I would say it seems fairly scary. It would be interesting to like see what it would be like if it was alive, but okay, it is dead. And I think that is one of the problems with this game too, that I'll get to later, that makes no sense story-wise. But yeah, so the Frozen Leviathan, kind of cool, but like it doesn't really count. So Leviathans are kind of lame. They're not in the ugly because there's still some cool stuff about it, but compared to the last game, boring. The story is kind of overwhelming. I don't remember anything about it, but apparently the game originally had like a completely different story, and then they changed it. But from what I remember of the story, it's like you spend the entire game trying to like figure out what in the world happened. And in the end, I think it's something like the dead Frozen Leviathan has the disease, which is weird because it's dead. How is the disease spreading through the body? I don't know. Whatever. I think that was the problem I was talking about earlier. But I guess I don't know enough about diseases to know if that's really makes no sense, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't make sense. But anyway, so that's the word I was looking for earlier. They're not investigating, they're studying it. She's in a crew that's like studying it. And I think what it is that her company ends up, they want to like collect the disease so they can weaponize it or something like that. Like they want to use it as a biological weapon. And so the main character's sister does not approve of this and ends up making making a cure for the disease, and then like hides it instead of just using it, and then blows up the area where they're like where they're like studying the Frozen Leviathan. It's just like, just use it. Why do you need to hide it? It doesn't make any sense. And like, I just don't. The story is very underwhelming, and it doesn't even really make sense why she would do what she did. I don't know. Also, I can't remember her name, but there's this character we hear about in Subnautica. We don't meet her or anything, but she's one of the characters that we uncover some story things about. And I think her name's like Marguerite or something. And she is like this super, super cool, strong, like competent woman who I think gets stranded on the planet and manages to like find a way to survive. And it's something like she kills a Reaper Leviathan and then like uses its guts as like a boat or something, or guts it and uses its dead body as a boat. It's pretty sick, honestly. It's pretty cool. But turns out where she floated to was in that Reaper Leviathan's body was now okay, so I guess it would be on the same planet, is now where we're at in Below Zero. So she's actually there and we encounter her. So now there's a completely different live human in the game, which honestly makes things less scary, because it takes away that to some degree, it takes away that feeling of isolation that you had in the first game. And I don't like that, because I think the isolation is a big part of what makes the game so cool. Just in general, the game kind of just feels less scary. I think part of that could be because I already played the first game, and so I'm used to some of the stuff. But I also then, after I quit Below Zero, I went back and I played Subnautica again, and it scared me. Like, right off the bat, one of the not even that scary like creatures freaked me out. So I think it is also just a problem with the game. And there's a lot of things that contribute to it being less scary, some of which I've already talked about, some of which I'll talk about later. But just in general, it kind of feels less scary, and I don't love that. Robin is the character that we play as, and unlike the last game which had no narration at all, this time Robin, like, just everything that happens, Robin talks, like, comments on it and has something to say. And I have multiple problems with that. First of all, it completely, like, prevents us from forming our own thoughts on anything that happens, like in the first game, and that's what made the first game so great. It also makes the game less immersive because it's, like, more obvious that we aren't the player, and it's also just so annoying. Like, half the dialogue is so stupid, and I'll get to that later, but it's just like, it was a bad addition anyway, and then you didn't even make the things that she said interesting or good. It's like, yes, I have a functioning brain. I know what's happening. I don't need you telling me everything that just happened. You're so annoying. So, you know, that's one thing that also really annoyed me with the game. The whole game also just kind of feels more linear than the first game, which sort of removes the feeling of, like, freedom and discovery that the first game has. It doesn't completely remove it, but it's not, like, as strong. The first game in some ways it's somewhat linear in the sense that there is a progression to it. There's certain things you have to do the next thing, but it's still a lot of exploration. There's some different orders you can do things, whereas this game is more just like, you go here and you do something, which now means you need to go here and do something, and now, like, it's a lot more linear. I think the big issue overall with Below Zero, but also something that I think gives them a little credit versus what I said earlier, where, you know, it kind of makes you wonder if it was just luck. I don't think the first game was just luck. I think really the problem with Below Zero is that they felt like they needed to make a lot of big changes so that it didn't just feel like a copy of the first game. But the problem is that they changed too much and they removed a lot of the best parts of the first game, and so it just didn't feel the same. So, like, one of the best parts of the original game is that sense of isolation, and I think in an attempt to change the game up and make it feel like something new and exciting, they added all this. They added, you know, another character that another human you talk to, and they added the alien Alan who talks to you, and then Robin says all this stuff. But it just takes away from that sense of isolation. Another thing that kind of is in a similar vein is, in both games there's this thing called the PDA, which it's sort of, imagine like an AI voice that just, like, talks to you. It'll, like, it'll, like, talk about things going on in the environment, or explain, like, what's going on. Like, there's just all kinds of stuff. And in Subnautica, it can be pretty helpful, and there's also a lot of, like, pretty funny stuff that it says. The new PDA voice, it's a different voice. The voice is worse, and it's, like, I feel like it's less helpful, and it's definitely less funny. And so they just made the PDA way worse, which is kind of annoying. Another thing is the map is smaller than Subnautica, which I've talked about before. But a problem with that is one thing that you're kind of intended to do in Subnautica. I actually never do this when I play it. But one thing you're intended to do in Subnautica is create multiple bases. So you create them in different areas that are important, and that way, instead of having to like once you're like deep in the game, instead of having to go all the way back to like the safe shallows to get to your base, you have a closer base. And there's various ways to like connect your bases and stuff. And I don't do that, but that's like one of the intended things that most people do when they play the game. But because the map is smaller, it decreases the need for multiple bases, which is kind of a negative thing. This is a YouTube comment that I saw someone put that's like a perfect representation of why, like, what makes so much of the dialogue so awful in this game. So I'm just going to read it exactly what it is, and it'll give you a general idea of, you know, what it's like. So they said, essentially, this comment said, essentially, there's two different types of dialogue between Alan and Robin. It's either Alan says, "You humans do a thing. We don't do that. It's stupid." And then Robin said, it is in fact very, very good that humans do that thing. And then Alan says, "I do not understand." And then Robin says, "Then maybe you are wrong for not doing that thing you don't do." Or Alan says, "That thing just happened. I will restate that it happened." And Robin says, "Yes." And that's like the general idea of like all the dialogue in this game. And it sucks and it's stupid. And why did you do this? Why did you add all this unnecessary dialogue when we could figure it out ourselves and it would make the game way cooler? Anyways, also most of the areas are like have super bright colors and are really well lit, which makes the game just less scary. That was one thing with the original games. There were some like pretty dark areas, and it makes the world scarier. It makes it, I would say, it makes it more. I don't know. It helps you really feel like you're there, because when the area is darker, it takes more of your focus to figure out what's going on, and the more you're focusing, the more you're kind of transporting yourself into that area. There's also less fog. That was one thing in the original game. There was just some like general like fog that prevented you from seeing too far into the distance. And this game has a decreased amount of fog, meaning you can see farther. And because of that, it again takes away from like the scary parts of the game, because you can see so much of what's going on around you, and there's less room for things to sneak up on you. I don't remember what it sounds like, but apparently the eating noise is like really gross, which I'm sure is true. Like I mentioned before, it can be like impossible to avoid shadow leviathans. And then we get to the ugly. This is the really bad stuff about the game, and kind of the biggest stuff that made me quit playing it halfway through. So first of all, the story progression is annoying in a bad way. It's not annoying in a way that's like challenging or like pushes you. It just sucks. It can be really difficult to figure out what you're supposed to do next. And just, I had to like Google so many times where I was supposed to go. It's just, it's a lot worse than the original game. Also, there is this like really important wreck called the Mercury 2 that's really big, and something that they added in this game that is really helpful because they made the wrecks a lot bigger is these things called oxygen plants. And what you do with oxygen plants is you can swim up to them and you can click on them and they'll like replenish your oxygen, and so it helps you to keep exploring these massive wrecks without drowning, because when you're deep underwater and you have to go really deep into this wreck, it can be really challenging to do that without drowning. So the oxygen plants are really helpful, and then it takes a certain amount of time and then they will like be ready to replenish your oxygen again. But specifically this wreck called the Mercury 2 is really important, but it's so annoying because there's barely any oxygen plants, which makes it a lot harder to explore. And it's also just incredibly hard to find. Even watching like YouTube tutorials where it was like, follow this exact path to get there, I still struggled to find it. And even when I got there, I'm pretty sure it took me forever just to find the opening to get inside. And then I don't know what this is, but apparently the PPU fragments are like important to progression, and they were in the Mercury too, but I had absolutely no idea no way to know that that's where the PPU fragments are. So it was like impossible to find, impossible to explore, and you don't even know that you're supposed to go there. So it's just like really annoying. And I don't know exactly why, but in Subnautica, I was always excited to like explore more and uncover the story. Whenever I'd get near like a new biome, it would be like a little scary, but I'd be excited to see what's next. But with this game, anytime I'd reach somewhere where it kind of like told me the next step of what I needed to do, it would just feel like a chore. Like I'd just be annoyed. I'd be kind of exasperated by it, just because the game as a whole was less exciting, and so it made me. It removed my desire to do the next steps to progress. Marguerite, who's the other human I mentioned, is barely important to the story, and like she barely contributes anything. She's kind of important to the story of like what happened to our sister, because she interacted with our sister, but like she didn't really need to actually exist. She didn't need to be alive for us to talk to. And so because of that, I feel like it would have worked better if we just got the information about how she survived through the PDAs, like in the first game, that like AI voice where you find bits of story and like you can like read what happened and stuff. Like that, I feel like that would be a lot better, because we don't really gain anything from her physically being there. And some of this information we learn about her is in the form of PDAs anyway, so why not just make all the information like that? Because then also it would at least contribute a little bit to like bringing back that feeling of isolation. I don't know. Another issue with having actual characters that you interact with like in real time is that it can make it harder to care about the other characters, at least in my opinion. Because you play as Robin and her sister's name's Sam. And the whole thing is it like starts out and you're like, I gotta find out what happened to Sam. I'm going to this island. But like not island, planet. I keep messing that up. But we don't know anything about Sam. We don't know who Sam is. We just know that it is our sister in the game. So we don't know Sam, but because we actually meet and talk to Marguerite and Alan, we know them better and we know more about them than Sam, which makes it hard to care about Sam, who's someone we've never met before. So even though the whole point of this game is that we're supposed to care about Sam and want to know what happens, I don't care at all, because there are other characters that I've actually learned about and interacted with and have given me a reason to care about. But then they are significantly less important. Now, the way, after the entire game, dealing with all of this annoying stuff that I've talked about, all of it, the way that we finally find out what happened to Sam, how she died or whatever, and how she was trying to how she made the cure and all this stuff, the way we finally learn the thing that we have spent the entire game working toward, and we have spent the entire game interacting with Marguerite, who worked with Sam, who helped Sam, who was involved in Sam's death. The way we find out is Marg hands us a PDA, and we read about what happens. Or it's like we listen to an audio log. She doesn't tell us. She makes us read about it. Why add the character that was directly involved in our sister's death that we were trying to find out about the entire time? Why even put her in the game if she's not going to tell us what happened, if we're just going to have to read it? Everything in this game could have been told through PDAs. Also, I'm losing my voice. Oh my gosh. And then, after we learn this, and we eventually like escape with Alan or whatever, or maybe not. I don't know. The way the main storyline ends is Robin basically is just like, all right, I have closure now, and then it's over. Like, that's the end of the storyline. It's so stupid. It makes no sense. Why would you do this? Now, as I've said before, a lot of the story, like, even though Marguerite is in the game, a lot of the story with Marg and her relationship with Sam, because Marg is very involved in what happened to Sam. Like, she helped Sam. When I say she was involved in her death, she was involved in, like, Sam's plan that led to her death. She didn't, like, kill Sam. But, she's, like, very important to Sam. But despite that, so much of the story with her and her relationship with Sam is told to us through PDAs, where we just read about it or we listen to, like, audio logs. And so it's so much of it is told through PDAs and, like, observation that it makes her presence so unnecessary. And so it's like I'm saying, if you're going to tell the whole story through PDAs, don't put the character in the game. Like, it makes her presence so much dumber and so much more annoying if you're not going to utilize it properly. Like, if you're going to take away from the sense of isolation by adding a character, then make the character actually contribute to the game at all. Please. It's also really easy to do the story in the wrong order. So basically what happens is you are supposed to go through the game. You find Alan. He, like, gets in your head or whatever and talks to you throughout. And then you find Marg. And with Marg's help, you eventually find the cure that Sam made. You use the cure to cure the frozen Leviathan. And then Alan, like, asks you, or maybe, and then Alan asks you to make him a body so that you can, like, escape together. That's the progression it's supposed to happen. The problem is they did not properly make the game progression, like, required in the way it's supposed to happen. So some people managed to finish the entire main storyline without ever encountering Alan, which meant that they had no idea what to do after curing the Leviathan, because they didn't know they needed to make Alan a body because they don't know who Alan is. And possibly even worse, some people were able to, because of the way the game's set up, you can accidentally, like, the cure is in the same spot for, like, the whole game. So you could, in theory, and some people have, you could, in theory, accidentally find the cure before ever meeting Marg. So you could just, like, make the thing that you need to grab the cure. It's like this little robot thing. You make it, you grab the cure, you cure the Leviathan, and you know absolutely nothing about the story. You did the most important part of the story. You completed the goal that your sister died trying to achieve, and that is, like, the whole reason that you're here in the first place, and you have no idea. It's insane. So, like, why did you do this? And then Sam, I just feel like I mentioned, Sam blows up the cave where the frozen Leviathan is in order to help stop the work on the disease. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad storyline, but the way it's presented is just incredibly underwhelming. Because she works for this big company called Altera, which is who you work for in the first game. You're, like, on an Altera ship when you crash. And so she works for Altera, and they spend the entire game, like, it's this mystery, and Robin is coming to this planet because Altera is, like won't tell what happened. They're, like, hiding it. And so it seems like it's going to be some big cover-up where, like, Altera killed Sam or something, and there's this big plot. But no, you get through this whole game, you expect some massive plot, and then turns out, no, just Sam decided to blow up a cave and one other person, like, literally one other person was in the cave and died. It's so underwhelming. Now, an underwhelming story can be done incredibly. The game Firewatch is one of the greatest story-based games of all time. I'm not going to say a single thing about the story. Other than that, you could argue that it's underwhelming. I'm not going to say a single thing about the story, because once you know the story, the game is completely ruined. But if you go into it not knowing the story, it, oh man, if you ever, if any of my friends are listening to this and you've played Firewatch, or you are going to, or you do play it in the future, please talk to me after you play it, because oh my gosh, I need to talk about the story. It is absolutely incredibly done, and it's just so good. But I can't talk about the story because it completely ruins it if you know the ending. But oh my gosh. But this is just underwhelming in a awful way. It's so boring. It's so lame. Also, there's just like so Alan spends like half his dialogue when he's talking about the architects. Half the time he talks about how they're all a collective and they don't think for themselves, and they all just like work together and whatever. Like the whole, he presents it like the whole point of the architects is that they like can't think for themselves or whatever. They just function together. But then the other half of the time, he's talking about like how the disease got out because he disobeyed orders and stuff like that. And so you can't present this race species as being like a race of like, it's like a hive mind and they all like work together and they're all of one mind and can't do their own thing. And then also the whole problem that started because he did his own thing. It doesn't make any sense. And then the last thing that I mentioned before, if the frozen Leviathan is dead, how does this infection still live on it? And also, even if in some way there's like, even if there's some excuse, some like disease, some infection that can like live on dead creatures, the antidote is like a shot. Like we use a syringe to inject the antidote into a dead creature. How in the world does the antidote spread through the body and kill the infection? Like, the dude's dead. It can't like pump through the blood or whatever. It doesn't make, none of the story makes sense. It's incredibly underwhelming, and it's just, half of it's completely useless. If you can't tell, I care a little bit about this subject. But it's just, Subnautica is such an incredible game that it's so disappointing that Below Zero is so much worse. Also, I'm recording this later, but I just wanted to throw in here, apparently there's a Subnautica 2 coming out in 2025. It's like on the Epic Games page and there's a trailer for it and stuff. I knew nothing about this, and I don't know what to expect. It looks like there's going to be a multiplayer option, which is kind of cool, and different, and I don't know, maybe I'll play it when it comes out. I could even make another Drew Yaps about it. But I just wanted to mention that apparently there's a new Subnautica game coming out. So when I said I didn't expect another one, I guess I was wrong. It's just, Subnautica is such an incredible game that it's so disappointing that Below Zero is so much worse. But that's just my opinion. If any of you have any thoughts on this, I would love to hear them. If you played both games and you thought Below Zero was great, I would love to hear about that, maybe hear why. Or even if you have only played Below Zero, I would especially be curious to hear a perspective on the game from someone who hasn't played the original. But I think it's going to be hard to find someone like that. But either way, thank you for listening to this. This has been a bit different. I've talked about music and TV shows. This is my first time talking about a video game. I don't play video games as much now, but it's been a big part of my life, and so I'll probably end up talking about more video games in the future at some point. But I hope you enjoyed listening to this. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you later.